Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of the Commercial Real Estate 101 Meetup Group. For those of you guys who are tuning in for the first time, we started this group back in April of 2021 in response to COVID. We wanted to create a group and an ecosystem where people could learn about the commercial real estate industry. And each week, or every other week, I should say, we invite speakers to talk about a variety of different subjects. This week's episode actually was an in-person meetup that we have here in Louisville, Kentucky. We invited a gentleman named Boz Lindgren. He's a director at Luckett and Farley, which is a local architecture and engineering firm in town here in Louisville. And we talked about the architecture and design process, what it looks like from a ground-up development standpoint and also from a redevelopment standpoint as well. So we asked him a variety of questions, and we also had a Q&A at the end where people had an opportunity to ask questions. So I think you guys will gain a lot of value from this discussion and episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback, and be sure to leave a 5-star review for the podcast. It really helps with making sure that more and more people can hear this message and supporting the community that we're trying to build here. So again, thank you all so much, and let's go ahead and dive into the episode.
So I'm Jeff Walston, the partner of Fidelity Development. This is why one of the reasons why we wanted to do this CRE 101 meetup. So and our guest speaker here is Boz. He's from Luckett and Farley, and then the co-host here is Raphael Collazo. He's from Grisanti Group, the CRE agency. So we appreciate you coming out for us and to drop some knowledge about architectural and a little bit of engineering, and just tell us about Luckett and Farley. So what we like to do is to get to know the person that's sitting across from us. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you started in your career and everything, that'd be great.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. Cool event, cool opportunity. Appreciate the invite. So I'm Boz Lindgren. I am the Civic and Corporate Commercial Hospitality Director at Luckett and Farley. That's a mouthful that just means we do retail and community development. We are Luckett and Farley architects and engineers, also interior designers and planners. So we've got a full suite of design services in-house. I'm an architect by training, originally from Indianapolis, by way of St. Louis for school, and married a lovely lady from Louisville who's got a gigantic family that goes about 80 deep for Thanksgiving. So I was destined to be here in Louisville. So that's a little bit about me on the personal side. Architect by training, like I said, and spent a few years with Tucker Booker Donhoff, now DKN, 6 or 7 years when we first got here to Louisville, and have been at Luckett and Farley for the past 10 years. So a little bit of a tenure there. At Luckett and Farley, I've kind of worked my way from architect to project manager, led our discipline managers, so architects, engineers, interior design, planners, led all of our technical staff for several years, and picked up the market development stuff following that.
One of the things we like to ask people, based on their background, is what exactly got you interested in architecture itself? I kind of mentioned to you, I come from an engineering background, and so always a good dynamic between architects and engineers. So what really got you interested in the architecture space to begin with?
Oh man. So I worked through high school and college in construction. Love creating things, love building things, and then spent the first half of my college career in the art world, and 4.5 years worth of art background taught me enough to know that I didn't have the desire to go do that professionally. So jumped to architecture. Had actually applied to architectural school out of high school because I knew that I liked the construction of things. Apply the aesthetics to go along with art, and architecture was a natural fit for me. Since then, I love aesthetics. I love the beauty of buildings. I love impacting the built environment of our world. But once I got into it and spent more time in it, I realized that it is a very personal venture, especially for the people who don't do it professionally. And I love that. I love that connection with people. I love that opportunity to connect and understand, and work through the experience of creating something that somebody said, hey, I need an addition. I need, help me clean this up. I don't know what this looks like. And there's a long process to go along with that. And working through that process and working and connecting with the people that I do that with is the strong passion right now.
Well, that process, I'm really curious about the process. So if you said it was long, but can we do like a little summary of what that process would look like? And then what are some questions, say that a client comes to you guys and says, hey, I have a project I want to do. What some questions should they ask so you guys can get started?
Man, so really interesting, right? Because people come at us from different angles. I guess, I'm sure everybody out there understands that process as well. People come at you from different perspectives, different needs, different understandings. So within the architectural world, if we're talking about greenfield build, which is new projects, new space, it starts from the planning side of things, and is the property planned zoned appropriately? Is it R, is it C, is it what type of covenants go along with the property? What type of restrictions do you have? From there, you go and say, oh, what kind of utilities do you have? Like you're putting in a gigantic distribution center. What do you need? Or manufacturing facility. What type of electric, water, sewer is available, and what do you need to make it happen? So we work through some of those items, and there's some entitlement processes that you need to work through, and that's working with a planner or civil engineer to work through the change of zoning process and the change, working with MSD here locally, LG&E. To identify what's available, what is possible within your particular development. From there, kind of fast forward a little bit, because that takes forever. Seems like it takes forever for somebody who likes to go fast. From there, then you start to, you need to know what you're building. What's the program? Program is kind of a list of spaces, whether it's 100,000 square feet worth of racking, or if it's I need 3,200 square foot exam rooms. It's a list of spaces that you're trying to determine, build out, lay out in the right way, and then you're dialing in from that point engineers to help you put a structure around the building, make sure that you've got the appropriate footings to carry the loads from the roof all the way down. The wind will not knock your building over. You got mechanical engineers that will come in and dial in the environment for you, make sure that you've got the right airflow, make sure that you got the right temperatures, humidity's all set, electrics, make sure that you've got the power. And then from there, once you've pulled all of that design together, then you're putting it out, depending on what type of method you use to procure the building. Like it might go out to bid for 2 or 3 contractors. When we work with the city, it goes out to anybody and their brother. So it's we have to be, as architects and engineers, we got to be real dialed in on that type of stuff. But then you go through the procurement method, and as architects, sometimes we will help out with construction administration, which just means you got a contractor, you've got an owner, and you got an architect, and the architect's job is to kind of mediate between the two, the owner and the contractor, make sure that it's being built the way that you want it.
And again, it just showcases the amount of moving parts that are involved in any commercial project. I mean, it's not just the architect, it's also the engineers, like you said. There's a planning and zoning component as well, which is something that a lot of people struggle with when they are looking at a site and they think it's going to be perfect for a particular use, and then they realize, oh wait, it's not properly zoned, and then there's a whole different process that has to go through in order to make sure that it actually fits what they're trying to do. And so it's kind of it's good to hear you kind of explain that process, because a lot of times people just think, oh, why don't you just put XYZ there? And it's a lot more complicated than just saying, let's just erect a structure that's going to be a new restaurant or a new hotel or a new theater or whatever. So
no, not to mention the owner who's got 1,000 different things that they want it to be, and you're working to try to understand what those are.
Exactly, 100%. So on the owner side, what are some of the common mistakes you see business owners make when they're and investors as well? We can kind of make this a 2-part question when they're looking to go through the process of designing or engineering a structure.
Oh man, what kind of mistakes? I don't, that sounds like a trap question, because, some of the challenges that we see are expectations. So early on, there might be a site that a person owns and they want to put a certain use on it, and it's just not meant to be. So expecting what it should be, you're trying to look for things that marry up. So maybe it doesn't have the site access that you want. Maybe it doesn't have the view that you want. Maybe it doesn't have, and you can't make some of those things happen. So having appropriate expectations on what it is. Understanding your business. One of the things that we work through as designers is asking as many questions as possible to understand what it is the person who's paying us to do what we're doing is doing. And if they understand it, like we work for Luckett and Farley does work for some of the big distribution groups around town that are professionals at what they do. They understand exactly what they want, and they're laying the building out for us. We also have clients that are very good business people, but don't know what they need out of a building. And so asking questions to get to what that is and what that means, and walking them through some of the steps to understand what that is really important. We work with visualizations, renderings to help kind of give some image to what it is we're talking about, because as architects and engineers, that we work in these like flat line drawings that people who aren't us don't understand what it means. And so, we at Luckett and Farley employ Nika is her name, this incredible visualization artist to help us understand what it is we're talking about at an early stage. So pretty interesting.
I want to talk a little bit about Luckett and Farley. So I own Premise Construction, and we dealt with several business owners that actually referred to Luckett and Farley, and actually they were able to take the time and sit down with them and ask those. I mean, there's hundreds of questions that they can ask these guys, and that they'll come in with the answers, and they've actually done it before. So the administrative services that I want to point out is a highly thing that I think you should get an architectural firm particularly involved with to help out with, because not all GCs and commercial construction contractors can fulfill all that for your needs. So that's one of the things that I just want to make a comment on it. But so I kind of want to change it up a little bit and talk about, I know we went through a pandemic, as everyone knows. So, and I've been asking people in all their different fields has anything changed because of the pandemic? Has anything that affected design, or are you seeing like office space or any of that stuff like kind of changing for that aspect?
Man, so interesting, because you can talk about what we're doing as a business internally and how that's changed the process of architecture. But I think your question is like, what are we seeing outside? What's the world doing? And if you dig into some of the Luckett and Farley stuff, we've got a fair amount of information on what's going on. So if you talk about the higher ed world, people are going hybrid, right? So a ton of our institutions are, if you want to be in person, be in person. If you want to be working from home, work from home. And we've got the infrastructure to support that as it goes. So like you guys are doing a good job of some people out in the audience, and then an incredible setup here to broadcast over the airwaves. Not that far distant from the higher ed work, from the office space. Like it's incredible, right? You hear Louisville Metro begging people to come back downtown, and forming large committees to make that happen, and drum up with the best ideas to make sure that we revitalize our downtown living space. And a big part of that is I don't have to be downtown anymore. I can work from my dining room table. I can work from my office. I can work from the couch, just as efficiently as I used to from my desk. And if I've got a bathroom right around the corner that nobody else is going to utilize, it might be where I want to be, And so that I think is going to be an interesting outcome. I think over the next year or two, we're really going to figure out whether that sticks, whether it doesn't. You say out of a pandemic, I still feel like with my mask in my back pocket that I'm still here, and it's an interesting experience to have gone through.
So yeah, I mean, and that's kind of a sentiment that we've been hearing from people. And Jeff and I have a podcast called the Commercial Real Estate Academy, and we've been interviewing people from literally across the nation, and we've been talking to brokers, developers, and blenders and all these different people across the country. And we're starting to get a feel for how people are responding to the post-pandemic world in their own unique ecosystem, whether they're in Jersey or New York or Houston or Dallas, et cetera. And we're kind of hearing similar veins of things that you guys are saying, especially pertaining to office. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are looking to, re-engage employees and coming back to the office and not necessarily having these silos of people that are across the nation just kind of, doing their own thing. And so, I think that the office environment is going to be shifting significantly over the next couple of years to be able to kind of create more of a welcoming environment and an ecosystem where people feel like they want to come back to work versus just sitting at home and, not engaging as much as they probably should. So it's kind of cool. One thing I wanted to ask you was pertaining to some of the projects you guys have been working on, because it's always good to kind of hear, obviously we've talked a little bit about how you guys approach the operation of executing a project, but sometimes it's nice to have some context with which to draw on. So if you could provide maybe a example, if you can provide an example of maybe a project you guys have completed maybe that you've been proud of yourself and how that played out, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, I was trying to think on really what the best example is. We are winding, and you're probably looking for a built example, something. Yeah. And so, and you want to know, kind of like, I can talk about, like the YMCA on 18th and Broadway. Yeah. So yeah, the YMCA, Republic Bank Foundation, YMCA, 18th and Broadway, pretty high profile one for us recently. And we've got a new design for JCPS school going in right behind it, which is rocking. So from beginning to end, that project took for us, like it was in the hopper for, 8, 9, 10 years, something like that. It only took a couple of years to construct, but it was being thought about, conceived, worked through, financed, staffed, taxes thought through, all of these things for that amount of time. This one was awesome. If those familiar with Louisville know that it was on the Brown and Williamson site. So a ton of foundry sand that needed to be removed from the site to make it safe. The YMCA is a health organization. Their big push is centralized health services. So that building, the YMCA, was conceived not just as a gym, not just as a pool, for people to come and exercise, but the idea was to provide services to the community that were all in one spot. So they've got there's a bank there, so financial wellness is important. We are wrapping up design on a small hospice facility within that building right now. They've got Gilda's Club. There's a teen tech center. So a number of different things. And we had to work through what that looks like, what the front face on Broadway is. We all know that the West End is a challenged moment for the city right now, and in providing a front and a center and an anchor to the Broadway corridor was a huge thing for us, for YMCA, for the community that we had to work through. So, in addition to just building a building, there are all of these things that come together to go into it. And I think even we worked with the city to try to find an artist that that it ultimately fell through, which was could have been an incredible moment on the site. That spot for the artist is now going to become JCPS school. So the YMCA, I don't know if you're familiar with the Norton Commons, YMCA, JCPS have a school have a school and facility connected that allows for the kids to share the gymnasium, the kids to come over and swim lessons, share all of that space that goes together. And I think that's one of the things that we're learning is, as a community, if you can kind of anchor things and share things together, it's an important moment. So, JCPS benefits, YMCA benefits, and most importantly, the kids there benefit, which is pretty awesome.
Is it a green build?
No, I don't remember whether it was, I think we designed it to LEED standards, but I don't know that there's a plaque inside the building. Good question.
And if you want to hold on or write down your questions, we'll do a Q&A right after. A couple other questions. So if somebody wants to learn more about architectural engineering, just like the process, are there any resources they could go to, like a website maybe, or should we just direct them just straight to Luckett and Farley's website, or is there actual like a national resource or anything like that that people can actually go to and like just read up a little bit to familiarize themselves, so they're not so new and not knowing what type of questions they can ask? So.
Yeah, so I architect by training. That's my background. The AIA is an excellent resource. It's our professional organization that gives a lot of information and like dumb leads on the website. So you want to build a building, click here, and it's we'll walk you through some of those things just from a super high level. And then beyond that, some of the there are some more specific facility type organizations that provide a good understanding of what the process actually looks like, or call me.
Yeah, that's definitely a good call. I would definitely encourage you guys to reach out to Luckett and Farley. Like Jeff was saying, they do phenomenal work around the city. So it really is an honor to have you guys here for sure. So we wanted to be able to kind of open up to Q&A to talk a little bit. If you guys have any questions pertaining to architecture, engineering, maybe your project you're working on yourself, if you're in development or whatever else, and you kind of wanted to get some feedback, I think this would be a good opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about that.
So we draw on a couple of different groups. I wouldn't say that we have a go-to necessarily on site legal issues, because our civil team and our planning team does a pretty good job of walking through the process and understands it. But when you do need to go through some of the changes in zoning and make sure that you've got deeds identified, covenants identified, anything that carries along with that, we use a handful of different attorneys. Sometimes the owner has a recommendation that they'd like us to utilize as well. So I don't want to plug anybody right now just because there are a few that we work with.
So I had a quick question pertaining to an existing structure. So what are some of the hurdles that you face out when you're doing some maybe like an adaptive reuse or redevelopment? Because I'd imagine in a situation where you're doing an or just a bare piece of ground, there's probably one set of things you can do versus a redevelopment or adaptive reuse where now you have to contend with the structure. Maybe there's other things that deferred maintenance, et cetera. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about some of the inherent struggles in that process and how you guys have utilize your expertise to overcome some of those.
Yeah. So adaptive reuse versus green or new build, which is really interesting from a what's available and what's the quickest path standpoint. Sometimes adaptive reuse can be a very good way to get things done. It's especially if what you're wanting to do fits with what that actually is. The challenges with adaptive reuse are what's been done, knowing what the structure is. So if you are looking to reuse something but really tweak it, then having an structural engineer on hand to understand what that is can be challenging. Availability of what you can see. So like what's interesting with adaptive reuse, and you walk into a space that's built out and finished, but you're like, I don't want any of this. I want to totally redo it. You don't know what's behind all of that stuff that's on the walls, on the ceiling, underneath the ground. You don't have a great idea until you start pulling things apart and getting into it. So that can be a challenge. From the new build side of things, like we like it because it's controlled, right? It's like doing something in a lab where you don't have any messy stuff to have to deal with. It's all clean and neat. When the contractor asks you like, what's this? You know exactly what it is. It's not something where you're like, well, we think it might be, that over there. There's a lot more knowns and a lot more control over doing something brand new. So, but from the environment standpoint, utilizing things that are available, not having to fresh new steel to go along with it, not having to brand new concrete. If you can reuse something that's already there. From a sustainable standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to go adaptive reuse. For us, one of the things Luckett and Farley really there benefits from is having both our architects and engineers in house. So when we have clients that are like, hey, I've got this thing, I want to redo this, can you like, what do you think about that? And if I'm an architect without a suite of engineers to work with, then I've got to go ask somebody, hey, I need your opinion. We've got this client that needs this stuff, as opposed to, hey, Joe, we're going to go talk to so-and-so about this. It's right there and available, and expertise in-house that we don't have to go outside for.
Yeah, and again, it's more so just because a lot of people, especially when they're starting to get into the development space, and I know Jeff and I were looking to get in the development space doing our first project. A lot of the buildings you see out there that are maybe not, they're currently vacant, or maybe they're in distress in some capacity, and there may be able to an opportunity to bring some new life to it. It's always good to know that there's professionals out there that you can tap into in order to, get a better idea of what can and can't be done. So, you have a question? Yeah. So the question, real quick, just for you guys who are watching, it's pertaining to the historic districts, and this is prevalent across the nation. So I think it'd be a great question to ask. He's asking questions pertaining to redevelopment or reuse of structures that are in historic districts and how you adapt to that.
Yeah, so helpful to have a architect who specializes in historic buildings because they can then talk the language. They're depending on how things are set up with regard to the requirements, whether it's part of a district, whether it's a building that's specific to historically significant, you'll find a range of what can and can't be done. Architects will talk about a couple of different things. Some things that are like preserve and protect, meaning don't do anything else with it. Try to restore, like super historic significant structures, restore it to its original condition, ideally to its original use. Then you go down from there. Like historic building, we want to make sure that we preserve it. Let's find the best economic use for it. Try to keep it as best as you can. What does that look like? Our historic architects, we have one on staff, can help walk you through that process. There are different and additional requirements through the Secretary of the Interior that have specific guidelines that walk you through the steps on what can and can't be done depending on a specific building's registration. But it is challenging, especially for like a homeowner that's like, oh, I switched out my windows because that's what I want to do. And they're like, like they get a knock on the door from somebody who's like, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you do that? So like, it's a painful moment for somebody who doesn't understand what that process is.
So that's a great question. So for those of you guys who are watching online, so just to give you guys some backdrop that aren't in Louisville, Louisville right now, we're having some issues downtown as far as filling office space is concerned. I think the office towers downtown are, I think, below 50% occupancy right now. And so he was asking questions pertaining if Luckett and Farley has gotten any calls from office owner buildings or owners of these office buildings that are looking to maybe reimagine what that office building looks like, whether that's, redeveloping in some capacity, maybe incorporating residential or something like that in the structure. So.
Yeah, and so absolutely. And from two different perspectives, one, the owner to the tenant, right? So tenants are looking to what can I do to either consolidate space or, bring my employees back to the office space? What can we do to be enticing them, to show them that this is a place where they want to come and collaborate with their colleagues? The owners are providing creative amenity spaces, coffee shops, fitness areas, opening up more of their public space to create synergy, trying to mix up the tenant mix so that, they are, if financial services groups all in one building to try to gain some energy there. So yes, we have we've worked with some owners and we worked with some tenants along those lines. And I alluded to it earlier. A large group of prominent citizens and business owners came together to kind of define some specific points that could be done. I forget. You might know the name of the group and where to kind of access some of what the outcome was. And so a lot of the business owners, Humana, JLL, who leases a ton of space, the city, GLI, all sitting on kind of an ad hoc government panel to revitalize and talk through what can be done. And so I know some of those things are in motion right now, and you're probably reading about some of them online. I don't know. We were a part of that 6-9 months ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's exciting to see that there's some movement as far as revitalizing downtown, because I feel like any time you're trying to compete with sister cities like Indianapolis and Cincinnati and Nashville in order to attract the workforce or the businesses that we know is going to what's going to make Louisville thrive, it's always great to have a vibrant downtown to kind of pull people in. So excited to hear that those efforts are being made. So
when they replace the windows and then get that knock on the door, that's when you should have hired an architect or somebody to help you out with that. Yeah, that's for me, like I've got a biased opinion. There are times from a development standpoint that an owner and a contractor can muscle things through, and I don't. I promote design, I promote engineering. That's why I'm here. But there are times when you can't do it. And as our architects, man, we get there are times you walk into a building, you're like, what the hell did they do? Because that wouldn't fly. But because you muscled it through as an owner and a contractor, or just as an owner yourself, you're like, yeah, the lay person is held to a different standard than the professional is. And so there are times when it makes sense to do that. But when you get, when you get in over your head, especially if you're dealing with life safety, like getting people out of a building safely, if you're dealing with structure, making sure that the building doesn't fall down on your head, those things, are kind of prime importance. When you're talking about environment, so all your guests are hot, like nobody's dying, but it's something you probably want to figure out. Again, a professional can help you out with that. So, yeah. So hire a professional. Yeah. And so one of the reasons, to hire an architect or engineer is because we've walked down this path a lot, and a planner from a zoning standpoint, a utilization of space standpoint, MSD requirements, and for a person who's not walked through the process before, a lot of things are straightforward. But there are a lot of things that are under the surface that you don't know anything about, and are really important to be asking questions of.
And I mean, I'm sure they can speak to this as well, like a build out of a space, and you're talking like restaurants and various other components that incorporate public safety and health. If you try to ad hoc it with someone who doesn't necessarily have the experience, then you run the risk of not getting your proper permitting and fines and all this other stuff. So. And you just don't want to deal with it. I've had other people that I've worked with that are like trying to cut corners and save in some capacity. I'm like, I don't know if I want to risk that. I mean, if it's your business, like if you want to risk it, then good for you. But, it may not be your business much longer. Yeah. So
what Boz was saying about, seek a professional first is the whole life safety aspect of it. Like if you're in the commercial realm and you're a commercial owner, business owner, and you're working with a contractor, you really do need to have them or someone. They need an architect to cover all those life safety. That's a big deal. I mean, you have a business, and now all the public's in you. Well, guess what? You're responsible for them. So all the systems in your business and everything has to work perfectly. So, I just dealing with a business owner. Probably 6 months ago, I ran into the same situation, and they're trying to do all these things, and I'm like, look. I'm not an architect. I do know all the systems, but we need to get this stamped, and we need to get, a lot of eyes on this to make sure, because if you're just going to open up this business and say you have 60 people in there and it catches on fire, well, if you don't have suppression systems and fire dampers and all these things set in place, I always encourage people to go to the professional first. A contractor's great. They do design builds and stuff like that. They always have architects and other eyes that are on that. So you shall too, as an owner, you owe it to the public to take care of them. So,
yeah, the Kentucky Building Code is 1,600 pages thick, right? And there's a reason for it. It's to keep people safe and to make sure that you are. It outlines all the codes and regulations and the laws that you're supposed to be following. And generally, if you're thinking from a common sense standpoint, it plays out, but you might not be thinking about, well, if I'm going to have 200 people in this space, which, and I've only got one exit and it doesn't open out, it opens in, and there's a panic and everybody hits the door and it's like bad things happen. And it's, there are codes and regulations in place. And if you're, willing to do the homework to read through the code, great. Or you could hire somebody who knows it like the back of their hand. So it's, to your point.
That was a long-winded answer to your question, Luke. Hire a professional. I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot from it, but if you could hire someone and save yourself the heartache and time, I feel like it's worth it. So the question is pertaining to the pipeline of new architects and some of the struggles that I'm sure a lot of industries are facing, recruiting and retaining top talent. So if they kind of wanted to ask you pertaining to that.
Yeah, and so of course, just like right now, any industry, it's not an employer's market; it's an employee's market. And so, kind of your question about owners of buildings, like we're trying to make sure that we're putting things in place. Luckett and Farley, I didn't mention, is an ESOP, so we're all employee owners. So we do things a little bit differently over there. For us, it's not all of the. We don't have three partners at the top controlling everything and receiving all the benefits and the risk that goes along with that. What we are doing is Luckett and Farley's large enough that we are able to go hit a lot of different career fairs, Ball State, Miami of Ohio, Cincinnati, all of the regional spots and locations to go out and talk through what we're doing. And being innovative and being creative plays a big part of that. People coming out of school want to be work for a group that is thinking intelligently and is thinking both with their best interests in mind as well as the interests of the public in mind. And so we work to sell those things. And then once we bring in the door to retain them and make sure that they're happy with where they are. So you got to be competitive on wages, which is, always a balance from a business standpoint, how much we can charge from a fee standpoint. So it's a cycle that we pay close attention to. And then, most, speaking for the architecture industry, like we all work in mentorship type programs. We want to make sure that people coming out of school, architects and engineers, are paired up with experienced professionals that know how to do things and can give good guidance to those new and inexperienced folks who just need somebody to walk the line for them.
Great advice. Okay. So we probably have time for one more question. I want to make sure that so the question is, if you have any questions pertaining to architecture, engineering, if you're working on a project, how can we get in contact with you?
Yeah. So luckettandfarley.com, and I've got business cards. Yeah. So my name's Boz Lindgren, market director for corporate, commercial, and hospitality, as well as civic at Luckett and Farley, luckettandfarley.com. For me, 502-619-9446 is my cell phone number, 502-619-9446. This is weird. So yeah, right. And I'll be around. I'll have business cards afterwards.
Well, awesome, guys. Well, thank you all for stopping by. We're going to be this actually happens every single month. We're going to do it the third Wednesday of every month. And the purpose of the meetup really is to foster a community of people who are interested in commercial real estate. So if you're a developer, investor, broker, regardless, we're just all trying to learn and grow together and help each other out as far as what the resources are that we have at our disposal. Because we have a pretty broad network. And we have the organizations like CCIM and several other larger organizations. But I think it'd be nice to have a Louisville-centric organization where we can really help each other out in our endeavors. So. Cool. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you coming by. Yeah.
And I just want to speak for the people on this live and on the recording. We're going to do this, like Raphael said, once a month. So if you have any ideas or you want to learn about a certain aspect of commercial real estate, please reach out to one of us, and we'll find the local expert that'll come up and speak and onto that topic. So, but yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, Boz, for coming out. Man. Appreciate it.